My name is Peter Cowie. I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean of the School of Global Policy and Strategy here at the University of California, San Diego. The school has both a global mandate and a Pacific focus, organized around specialized knowledge concerning Asia and the Americas as one of its foundational strengths for the school. And that's reflected in both our curriculum and our research. One of our research centers is the Japan Forum on Innovation and Technology. Professor Sheda is with us today, who heads that. And then another key asset of the school is the Center on Global Transformation. The center is both, in a sense, our skunk works, where we think about many of the cutting edge methods that we'd like to develop in programs, try them out, launch them up, and have them become part of the family of our school. But it's also the home of our Pacific Leadership Fellows program. And this program is made possible by the generosity of Joan and Erwin Jacobs. The PLF program has brought to the school and to the San Diego region a number of distinguished leaders from government, from the nonprofit sector, and from corporations and universities around the world. It's greatly enriched our lives at the school. It's greatly built networks for the university around the world, and it has also, by design, helped network San Diego into the broader global community, reflecting this theme of the series here at iHouse of connecting the local with the global. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having Eric Gahn with us. Eric has a special place in my heart. We've been friends and collaborators over the years. And I was just thrilled when Eric said he could find some time to be with us at GPS. Let me tell you a little about Eric. Eric started his life professionally in terms of first major career move by being at Goldman Sachs out in Hong Kong. But along the line, and what led me ultimately to get to know Eric, was that he decided to become an entrepreneur in Japan. And our particular association, and what made Eric famous in Japan, was that he and another friend of mine, Sachio Semoto, who also was a Pacific Leadership Fellow here, decided that in this well-established Japanese telecommunications landscape, which was dominated at the top by NTT and its subsidiary for mobile communications, DoCoMo, as at one time the largest company in the world. That world with first DoCoMo NTT, second KDDI, another well-established, long-standing Japanese major corporation, and this other company that was an upstart that was succeeding, SoftBank, were already there when Eric and Sachio Semoto decided that they would launch a fourth major Japanese mobile carrier company. And their strategy was audacious. It was deliberately different in every sense of the word, and it proved to be an innovator both in the technological design of the network, its operational strategy, and its business model. For example, it mainly sold data, and it was the lowest priced network in Japan with the fastest network in Japan as a way of differentiating itself. The success of eMobile and then its sister company, eAccess, was such that eventually SoftBank decided that it didn't need a fourth rival, and Eric soon found himself as executive vice president of SoftBank Japan, heading a new subsidiary that used to be eMobile. Since then, he has moved on to become the Executive Vice President for Business Development of SoftBank Japan. It's an extraordinary story. He's an extraordinary person. And we talked about how to best give some additional color to the details of this story. And we decided this is our game plan for the evening. We're going to have Eric do a little bit more of, if you would, color commentary about his career and interests in a short PowerPoint presentation. Then he and I are going to have a conversation about some of the aspects of change, not just in Japan, but in Asia and in the global information and communications industries. And then we're going to open the floor to your questions. So with that said, welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you for the very long introduction, actually. You're going to hear that all again, actually, with some graphic presentation. It's an interesting time to make a presentation in America, actually, because I was watching all your election at night in the evenings. Very entertaining, but I cannot be as entertaining as Donald Trump. You know that he's the most entertaining guy there. That's why I just learned that he can earn $1.5 billion worth of airtime from the media because he's good at it. But thank you for having me in San Diego. And let me give you a short presentation about my venture when I started eAccess, when Peter was actually helping me a lot at the beginning and served as an outside director for many years of eAccess. So he knows the story very well. So I have to bore you again. Let me just go up here and let's start. How can I get this? Here we go. Okay, this is the story of my venture in Japan. And before I introduce the story of eAccess, that was a company I founded about 15 years ago. I'll just talk a little bit about myself. You can tell that my name is Gan. So I live in Japan, but I'm not Japanese. I'm from Hong Kong. I speak Cantonese, but I cannot make presentation in Cantonese. So I was born in Hong Kong. I was educated in the UK. I went to high school, boarding school. I went to Imperial College, London, and got my chemistry degree. I have a chemistry background. And don't ask me why I go into finance and telecom, but that doesn't matter, actually. I've been living in Japan for now 26 years. So my first job was actually in London. After I got my degree, I learned a little bit of Japanese. And I started as a financial analyst in London. But I started my career almost as the most difficult time in Japan because we have the first bubble in Japan at that time. We have the Tokyo Bay, the real estate bubble. When people actually look at real estate market, they do funny valuation methodology. Let's say they look at Q ratio to value real estate. We use yield right now, but those days they have all kinds of funny way to do valuation that bring the Nikkei index to the all-time high at 38,000. Today the Nikkei is only about 15,000 or 14,000. So you can see it never went back even halfway to the bubble level. And that's when I just started my career. So I decided after the crash of the Japanese market, I wanted to go to Japan. I wanted to go and do more analysis, more fundamental research of Japanese companies. So I went to Japan in 1990. And I got a very interesting sector, the most exciting sector, which is really not very exciting. Because in Japan, I cover telecom sector, which is now a big deal. But those days in Japan, there were only two companies, NTT, KDD. NTT did domestic, KDD international. And even those days that the foreigners, they are not even allowed to buy the telecom stocks in Japan. So I got the most exciting sector. But I got very lucky because 1994, we have the deregulation in Japan. And that's because the government decided they should bring in more competition. Rather than have just two companies in Japan, they introduced more competition in the mobile area. Then you have now, DDI comes in. At the same time, you have Japan Telecom comes in and get a mobile. And also Toyota came in with another license. And the competition actually just started. I actually did a lunch. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. I do apologize. You have to hear this again. At that time, actually, when I look at the mobile phone industry, and in Japan, actually, we have Japan mobile phone in 1979. But at the end of 1993, we only have 1.7 million, only 1% penetration. And a lot of my competitors say, no, Eric doesn't know Japan. Mobile phone is not going to take off in Japan. We know it's not true. So I make the forecast. I say, no, if the phones, actually, if you have more competition, improve the services, lower the price, everybody wants it. It's very simple. It's just supply and demand and pricing. But all our competition said, no, Japan has more payphone. People don't like to talk in front of people. That's a Japanese culture. It doesn't make sense. So actually, I have the very good opportunity to actually be involved in the DoCoMo IPO project in 1998, which is one of the world's largest IPO. I kept that record, $18 billion. Remember, I'm a foreigner in Japan working for Goldman Sachs, a foreign stock investment bank. So it's pretty amazing that we have the opportunities to win the IPO because I know the management very well, build the model. And that I kept the record for 10 years, except a few years ago when China Construction Bank came in and Alibaba came in and broke the record. But I kept the record for 10 years for the world's largest IPO. And I also did a few financing for NTT, the fourth privatization for the fourth tranche and fifth tranche, IIJ SmartTone and Hong Kong listing. So I did a lot of the listing, and I decided it was kind of boring to just go out on the road and sell the equity of somebody else's company. And I remember I came to San Diego when I was doing the IPO for DoCoMo, and everywhere actually, because it's a big IPO. I remember when investors look into my eye at the end of my equity presentation, equity story, they will say, Eric, what are the risks? And I know deep inside that the risk is the people inside the company. It's management execution. But how can I ensure that risk can be minimized in front of my shareholder, in front of the investor? So it's always management execution, whether they can execute the model, whether they can handle risk, whether they can handle competition. The only way to do that is to start your own telco and you are the management. Then people ask me, Eric, what are the risks? I say, it's going to be me, but I'm going to do this and that. So then that actually, before I started EXS, I can also see after the IPO of DoCoMo, we have in 1999, the dot-com bubble. And everything went crazy at that time. And we look into the Goldman Sachs pipeline. They have eFlower, eToy, eThing. eBay is doing well, but all the other E except EXS, they're all going to be coming to the public equity market. But I just think the market was super overheated. It's going to burst. So then I decided to leave Goldman Sachs. I remember I got a big check from Goldman Sachs, Hank Paulson, because I've done all the big IPOs. I actually handed back the check back to Goldman Sachs, and I said, I'm quitting. And they said, it was still the peak of the bubble, actually. They said, what's going on, Eric? Why are you quitting? Are we paying you enough money? They pay me a huge amount of bonus. I said, no, I don't want your bonus. I want to get out because I want to start my own telco. And I remember my boss, Mark Schwartz in Japan, is now the vice chairman of Goldman Sachs. He said, okay, I understand. We really like entrepreneurs. We let you go, but there's one condition. You let Goldman in to fund to be the first round of your company. So Goldman Sachs was the first investor of EXS, which is very lucky I got my funding. But it turns out actually it's the check I paid to Goldman, my bonus, paid back to Goldman, and they just invest back in EXS. So they didn't lose. They're very smart. So I started the company EXS November 99 with my partner, Dr. Sachio Senmoto. We started together because he has a lot more startup experience in the telecom space. And the first business we look at is ADSL. And ADSL we know now is almost like history. But at that time, we have seen a lot of the company we started the company with only one door. We can not even afford a proper door. We have this aluminum door. We just kind of lock it, and we have 2 tables and about 15 people. A real startup, which people think, Japan, startup, it doesn't work. So we did it. We actually started the company. And why we look at ADSL is interesting that a lot of the ADSL companies just went bankrupt in the US after year 2000 because of they don't get enough funding. So I actually brought a lot of the regulators from the government, actually from the ministry, come to the US to learn about the failure of the ADSL startup. So the question we normally ask is, what will you do, what would you have done if you can have a chance to restart your company in ADSL? We learned everything. We take notes, and the government took notes. And then we went back to Japan, we rewrite the business plan. We have almost the perfect business plan for ADSL because we learned everything from the failure story in the US. And same as my first career when I started as an analyst, we had a bubble crash because of the real estate bubble. When I started eAccess, we have the .com bubble just crash. And with the time when I raised money, we have the 911 in the US. And also we have a strong competitor just come in, decided, which is now SoftBank, when they started Yahoo Japan ADSL services, which their pricing was half the price that we were offering at the beginning. So no one actually will fund eAccess because look at all these things. We got a kind of the triple hit by all these three things. But very fortunate, when I went to raise the round B, I cannot even go to round C, round B is the last round already. We went to Carlyle, which they actually have some investment in ADSL, and North Point just went bankrupt. So I went to see Bill Conway, which is the founder of Carlyle in Washington. I make my pitch. I said, I know why you fail in the US, and because of this reason, and we can do this in Japan, and then we can make this model work. And then he just stood up and said, it's interesting that we just make a failure in the US, but we can actually do it in Japan and tell people we do understand the technology, it can work. So then I know that the last round of Carlyle, raising $100 million with other investors as well, will be the last round. I told all my staff, this will be the last money you can get. You won't get any money anymore. So everybody actually treat this money very valuable. We have to go all the way to profit, cash flow positive. We turned profit in the second year since we launched the services. And then we went IPO in 2013, actually is the shortest corporate history ever listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. 2003, sorry, not 2013. And then we start doing really well. And we have $1 billion market cap, and people actually come to me and say, you need to do more. Because that's the biggest problem when you go IPO. People come to you and just, think you got to have a high growth company. Because I know that ADSL eventually will be replaced by optical fiber. So we have to look for something very long term to build a brand, to build the customer relationship, and to build a much bigger business plan. So we started eMobile, which is we were very lucky to get the fourth license in Japan in 2005. We can even afford a pretty girl then to do the marketing for us. You can see the eMobile design actually. And at that time, we only have $1 billion in market cap, but we managed to raise equity and debt together, about $4 billion to build the network. We built everything from scratch. I love building everything from scratch because I can learn also. We built the base station, the shops, the call center, the new HR department. Same thing again happened. We were borrowing a lot of money. Then we have the Lehman shock, because it's in the US actually, that everything shut down. No one is going to lend anybody any money. It also affects Japan as well. By the time actually when we borrowed so much money to build the network, when I borrow the money, people think that, hey, don't worry, when you need to pay back, it's not equity. When you borrow money, you have to pay back. I said, don't worry about payback. We can do refinancing. And then when I just started refinancing, I remember when I launched, because I could not raise any money from the Japanese banks after the Lehman shock. So I have to think about where should I get the money. There was one market that would still have some liquidity, which is high yield, which is now we call junk bond. So we got a rating in Japan, and we were the first company, the only company actually to do high yield in the US. And when the launch the day, the high yield actually, we have the tsunami in 2011. I remember when I checked into the hotel in LA, my wife called me, He said, we have a big earthquake in Japan. I said, well, every day we have an earthquake in Japan. What's the big deal? So I hang up. So I check in, I went to the bar, I got a gin tonic, and then I look at the TV, I say, oh my God, everything is shutting down because it's not just the tsunami and earthquake. We have the nuclear meltdown in Fukushima as well. I couldn't even call back to my family, so I actually texted to my engineers, I can get priority line. That's a good thing about having a telecom company. You can get priority line that you can always talk to the people you want. So I asked my family to move outside Japan to go to Hong Kong. So I called my team, I said, what should I do? I said, boss, if you cannot do the refinancing, we're done. Keep going, don't come back. There's nothing you can do, just keep. So actually, I didn't go back to Japan even the days when I launched the bond. So I went to all the investors to raise money. And people were just looking at TV and watching the Fukushima, the nuclear meltdown. And I keep saying that there's no problem, Japan will be okay. Japan's still okay, so I was not lying. And after 2 weeks of finishing the roadshow, I went back to my house to Japan and said, wow, God, everything shut down, really shut down. I thought that I would never raise any money. My company is going to go bankrupt because I cannot raise the refinancing. And I got a call from my banks, UBS at that time. They said, Eric, you seem to attract a lot of interest because people are looking at Japan. Maybe they pity you. They want to give you money to actually rebuild Japan, to build a new network. Originally, I was trying to raise only $500 million. I got $2.5 billion demand for the bond. So sometimes, really bad things happen, some good things happen. So we know that refinancing, the money this is going to be the last money. We have to make it all the way to the big success. So we used the money to build the first LTE network in Japan, the fastest LTE network in Japan. We were the first one who understand 5G because we think this is going to be the future when our 3 competitors are still holding on to the voice network, whatever the 3G network. So thank you to Steve Jobs when he announced the iPhone 5. LTE is the biggest feature of iPhone 5. And I got a call immediately, the same day after iPhone 5 announcement, that the features is going to be LTE. So Masa called me that day. I said, hey, we're competitors, so why are you calling me? He said, hey, let's have dinner. I said, why do you want to have dinner? It's Friday night. I said, come on, just one dinner Friday night. So after the dinner, he took out a piece of paper and handed it over to me and my partner. He said, write out the numbers, and we're going to buy your company. And we're a public company. We cannot just sign the paper over the dinner in the restaurant and just call the merger. I said, no. We need to have due diligence, fair, investment banking, fairness of opinion. We have a process, called a board meeting. And I said, okay, I understand you have to go through the process. It was Friday night. Let's do all these things and announce on Monday. But we know it doesn't work that way. So anyway, but we did the deal, a $4 billion merger between SoftBank and E-Mobile, E-Access at that time. Enterprise value was up $4 billion. We finished in a week, which was very fast. And we announced it. So we merged the company January 2013, and I stay on. I did some global investing for SoftBank, and then my wife was killing me because I was traveling too much. And now I'm focusing mainly on domestic investment. But I can invest global technology company and bring them to Japan. But I can also, but my focus is mainly right now on the Japanese operation. So what I'll try to share with you is actually, I came from Hong Kong and now living in Japan. But when I was a financial analyst, I only do a lot of just very simple modeling. But when you start a company, actually, it's so different. The model is real. It's not just Excel. You have to look at building the real business plan. But I've done round A, angel round A, round B, going public, project financing, senior debt, M&A, high yield, swap, and also delisting. Not many people have the experience to do delisting. I've done the full textbook of financing. You name it, I've done it. But at the same time, very fortunate, for the last 15 years, I also not only learned about financing, I learned about running a company. I learned about how to build an organization, an HR review system, network, technology, accounting, reporting, regulation, marketing, churn, everything about These are the things that you will never learn from a textbook if you don't do a startup. You don't do your own venture. So my last message to you is, I've done it. It's time for you to start your venture. Thank you.
Well, thanks for a great brief presentation, Eric. And so I thought I'd start our conversation by just making a note about the way in which established technology experts can be overly conservative. You said, people said that Japan would never buy mobile phones. In the United States, in the early 1980s, AT&T, then a monopoly, with Bell Labs, the greatest research organization in the world, came to the Federal Communications Commission and told the FCC that if they had a continued guaranteed monopoly in mobile technology for the next 25 years and had all the radio spectrum that was necessary, that by an all-out massive mobilization of AT&T's expertise, that by the year 2000 there could be 250,000 people in the United States with mobile phones, right? So these mindsets are often one of the hardest things to break. But I want to talk about a different sea change, and just hearing you, I think, will let people understand this question. The Abe government in Japan is dealing with the question about how to reignite long-term growth in Japan. And it's making a large bet that further globalization of the Japanese economy and nurturing a new entrepreneurial economy will be ways of dealing with some pretty negative factors for Japanese growth, whether it's demography or the fact that many of the companies still have not yet restructured compared to their glory days of the early, let's say, the 1980s. But you clearly exemplify this new entrepreneurial world. And when I was on the E-Mobile board, one of the first things I was struck by was that all the board meetings were in English, which would have been unheard of for a Japanese corporation even 10 years before that. But what I really want to know from you is, how much has Japan changed? Are you still the handful of folks at SoftBank and your fellow veterans that came out of e-access that are unusual? Or do you really see a sea change in the way that Japanese business is both organized and sees its strategy in the world?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, actually. I'm now living in Japan for more than 26 years now, actually. And do I see a lot of changes? The strict answer is no. And we have seen a lot of changes in the number of prime ministers. I've been in Japan for 26 years. We have already got more than 20 prime ministers. And some of them I cannot even remember the names, but they were there. This is real, 20 prime ministers. And Abe is actually the prime minister, second longest lifetime prime minister in the cabinet after Koizumi. So probably only remember two names, Koizumi, Abe. All the people before, after, in the middle, you have no ideas. Actually, the one middle is called Mr. Khan. So I think Abe right now is very fortunate because the opposition government after the nuclear meltdown tsunami, the whole opposition government actually just totally just fell apart, and they cannot put the policy together. So now the ruling party, LDP, will have the opportunities to hold, to have the same cabinet, to have the same policy for at least a few years. I would say about another, up to at least, lucky we got the 2020 Olympics. So probably LDP can hold on all the way to Olympics, which is actually now the government will have enough time to put some longer term policy to change the economy. And before that, actually, Koizumi-san actually also did a pretty good thing, is to change, to shape up the banks. He hired someone from outside, from Keio University, Takenaka, to come in, to make a lot of really disruptive move to change the financial industry, to shape up the banks. And they have done a lot of things to clean up all the old bad debt, which has been with the bank for many, many years. and they changed the financial system. He's done a lot of things. But Abe right now actually is doing something new. He's thinking about building to revitalize the economy, which everybody wants to do that. But the problem is right now is the ecosystem is not there in Japan. I keep talking about ecosystem. What's the ecosystem in the US? You have a lot of venture capital money here. And this risk money, or actually this money, can actually look for good ideas and fund the entrepreneurs, and then help the execution, and then either sell the company and go for the IPO and have the exit there. So that actually drives the economy and drive a lot of deregulation. I remember when I started eAccess, I went to the government, how come you don't deregulate more and invite more competition? They said, no, Eric, you don't get it. We can deregulate as much as we want, but there are hardly any entrepreneurs who could come to my office and ask for the deregulation. So deregulation is not just the government, it's also coming from the entrepreneur, the private sector. So today, actually, you need a lot more Eric Gan to do more deregulation, actually. But I think the first thing is Japan has to build the ecosystem to have a stronger venture capital community to incubate the good ideas and entrepreneurs, and then bring the synergy back and revitalize the economy. Otherwise, I just do not see any changes right now. There are some companies that have done it, but not many compared to the US.
Can you give us an example or two of some companies that are doing it that you think are promising, just so people have a little feel for this?
Well, the last 10 years, apart from eAccess, which is a shame that it didn't make it all the way to become a very independent and very large company. Well, $4 or $5 billion is large, but it didn't reach the mega-sized company like $10 billion, $20 billion mark. So a few companies actually make it $10 billion mark is Rakuten. They did pretty well on e-commerce, and also DNA with the games, and also Greed. So there are a few companies, they found their own niche, and they made it to $10 billion, a few $1 billion marks. And then now, they're aggressive also. They're very young entrepreneurs. I know all of them, actually. GMO is also one of them, and Cyber Agents. And they actually, it's interesting that because of their entrepreneur leadership, they start hiring a lot of talents inside and outside Japan. So I told my HR department, the way we're hiring just inside Japan is not going to be good enough. My competition, the OTT, which is the company I just mentioned, they're already setting up office in the US, in Vietnam, in China, just looking for very, very bright talents to hire to build the business. So I think the strategy of incubating or helping the new talents is the biggest issue right now.
Great. So it's not just that Japan faces this challenge of a transition in its strategy and its ecosystem, but the world that both you and I have spent a lot of time in regards to communications and information technology is also going through a sea change right now. So I wonder if you could share with people here this sort of a brief sketch of what you see as the most exciting things in that changing technology edge around the world. Doesn't have to be comprehensive, but a few things.
Okay, I know you know that already. We spoke yesterday. So after the merger with my company with SoftBank, so my boss asked me, Eric, you can do whatever you want, but bring new businesses to SoftBank, which sounds fun, but it's actually quite difficult, because to bring new businesses, it has to make sense. It has to be something big. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense why you're doing it. So last year, when I started my division, we have a vision. We look at hundreds of ideas, hundreds of startups globally. We look at healthcare, IoT, robotic, energy, cloud computing, security, many, many things. I look at everything. I look at even the gene DNA sequencing, and from IoT, whatever, robotic, everything actually. So, and I just cannot focus on too many things like the venture capital. My team is very small. It's only less than 10 people at that time. So I actually limit down to 3 areas that I think that I'm interested in. All the other areas have good potential. The 3 things I think have very strong synergy with the mobile industry, with the mobile network. is the cybersecurity. I think now we're looking at data. We should be careful about security issue. Also the cloud computing, which is where you actually use your apps, where did they put the apps, where did they host the apps. And sooner or later, the consumer can use the cloud computing as well. And the third one is fintech, which is, I think I'm so tired of my wallet having all the plastic cards inside. I think those plastic cards should be digitalized and put in the mobile phone. So, which is already happening in the fintech area in the US already. So these three areas, I think, will be helping the telecom industry to go into a different stage. Mm-hmm. Because the telecom industry has already lost a lot of the franchise. In the past, actually, mobile company, we own the device, we own the messaging platform, we own the content, we own the data, we own the voice. Every layer. We call the walled garden model. We own everything. But when Apple came in with iPhone, then Android came in with the OS. They have the Apple Store, the iTunes Store, and Google has Play. They took over the content and the device. So telco no longer own the device and the content. So then we still own the telecom part.
In fact, they had to subsidize the device.
They have to subsidize the device right now, and and that's why they're making so much money. And also, we lost the entire OTT platform, messaging platform, to WhatsApp, which probably everybody's using, to Line in Japan, to KakaoTalk in Korea, because the telco never upgraded the SMS platform, the MMS platform. So what do we have now? We have only data that we are still charging, but the data, we are not even have a good collaboration around the world. So when people travel overseas, the first thing they do to turn off the data, which we are going backward, which is stupid right now. And then the last bit is the voice, which not people using the voice right now, they're using texting. So I think the mobile industry right now, if we don't think about new businesses to get some of the franchise back, I think we're not dying, but I think it's going to be the most boring industry that we are doing right now, we're facing.
So let's take another dimension of this changing landscape. And it's true that companies compete, not countries. And so we always should be careful about talking about countries competing with each other. But in the larger landscape, when you think about information technology and these changes in the world, the places you think about besides Japan, out in Asia particularly, are Korea and China, and to some extent India. And then, of course, you think about the United States. And Europe as a whole lags badly, although it has a couple key competitors like Ericsson. Give us a sense from your perspective, looking out across the global landscape, how different countries and their ecosystems are equipped or not so well equipped to be leaders in this changing frontier.
Well, this probably the most obvious is China, because they have the opportunity to leapfrog a lot of the technology because they came late, and they have the size of the economy. So we have a company in China, Alibaba. They're doing very well in e-commerce, and now they're moving into fintech with Ant Financial. They're doing extremely well. And if I look at a lot of the fintech technology in the US, actually, they were nowhere even close to what China is doing right now today. And also what WeChat is doing in China compared to what WhatsApp is doing in America. So they have the scale, they have the size, and also they have kind of the closed policy. They play the cards kind of okay, pretty well. They closed the world with no YouTube, no Google. So they have time to grow Baidu, have time to grow Xiaomi, have time to grow the WeChat as well. So, and then, but if they do it too long, they will just spoil this company because the world is competing with everything, every single technology. So at one stage, they have to open up and compete with the rest of the world. And we look at India is coming up right now, and also I think we have made a lot of investment in India right now, which is all public. And we look at a lot of the upcoming country in Vietnam. They have a lot of really smart people, and also Cambodia and all the other countries. I think they will be a pretty big threat. So I think America actually work harder actually to be in front of the curve rather than doing catch up. Not catch up, I think being caught up from other countries.
So one last question before we turn the floor over to our audience. You've talked about how your experience has taught you not just about financial models, but how to build an organization. So we have a lot of our students here. If you were telling them one or two things that are keys to being a successful technology entrepreneur, what would you say are the most important lessons you learned about that?
Wow. Actually, when you start a company, when I left Goldman, I thought, hey, I was still young. I can start a company. If I fail, it's okay. That's not okay, actually. Because after I started the company, and I remember after 9/11 when the whole world actually shut down for financing, I got a call from Goldman actually saying, Eric, I know you tried very hard, but I think that's the end right now. We have a door, you can come back anytime you want. I said, what are you talking about? Because when I look outside my room, I can see 200 people. They came to my company, they left, very big company, they trust me, they trust my partner, and they're working very hard. They have no idea what's going on. And you have an obligation to make it successful, not only for your employees, for the family as well. So when you start a company, the bigger you go, the more responsibility you have. So it is actually, there's no way, no U-turn actually back to, let's try to look for a job when you're not successful. You have an obligation to your employee, to your staff, to make it very successful. That's why I try very hard to make make all the financing to support the company. But when you make the financing, when you raise money from the private equity, from the financial market, you also have an obligation to the shareholders to make the exit for them, to get the exit for them. So the only way to minimize all the risk is actually come down to 2-3 things actually. It's always how you plan your business. Do your planning, very well planning. I bought a book in America, How to Write a Business Plan. You should buy it actually. It's a really good book actually. And when I actually go through, even for venture investment, I send the same deck. If you don't do this, we will not give you any money because you're not thinking through the whole process. About go-to-market strategy, about your branding, your HR system, everything. It has to be a full deck. It cannot be just so rough in just putting in Excel and you're done. No. When you put it in, you have to think through all the risk in the whole deck, in your whole financing, on your whole business plan. The business plan is not just for raising money. It's a plan that you sell it to your employees, your staff, the team. They have to believe it. They have to execute the model together. Then you have to hire the right people. You have to hire people that they will follow you. We talk about leadership here. What is the definition of leadership? You have to have followers. I've never seen a leader without any followers. So you really have to make sure your followers buy into your plan, buy into your business plan, buy into your goal. So I remember when we do the business meeting in the early days of eAccess, and they said, oh no, when we talk about financial, we should cut out everybody. To talk internally with just a small group of people. I said, no, I want every single people to know the business model, down at the very bottom level, to understand. Even we publish a monthly report to everybody. That's no secret, because we are all in the same boat. We are all executing. Everybody can see the numbers, and everybody is like the owner of the number that I'm part of these costs here. Maybe I can do something to get it down. So the takeaway is when you actually build your business plan, you make sure when you start hiring, they have to share everything if you're going to be the leader. Every day what you're thinking with your team. You cannot just do it here and then, hey, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to only tell my shareholders. Outside, all right, it's not going to work. So we share everything. We continue to share our knowledge with your team. And also that's the only way you can actually grow them. EX, I have at that time 200 employees. 90% they are from new graduates. They are pure from the college. Only 10% actually we hire from outside. So I think it's time to start your venture. So when you do your business plan, when you actually look at do the hiring, make sure you go through every single detail of the business plan.